The clock hands reached 1847 hours on April 23, 1945. Compound 7 sat in the German countryside near Wiesbaden. A makeshift prison processing center had risen from nothing in just days. Inga Hoffman's fingers wrapped around the cold wire mesh. The fence pressed against her face as she strained to see. American trucks rolled through the compound gates. Canvas covers flapped in the evening breeze. Soldiers jumped down from the truck beds with practiced efficiency. Then the aroma struck her senses like a physical blow. Roasted meat. The smell carried across the yard, rich and savory. Her stomach clenched with recognition and disbelief. Fresh bread followed. Yeast and wheat flour. Scents from a forgotten world. A world that existed before rationing. Before ersatz, everything. Before the war consumed all abundance. 18 months had passed since she last encountered such smells. Elsa Bergman stood pressed against the same fence section. Her body trembled. Words escaped through chattering teeth. They prepare our final meal. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Before the execution. The propaganda messages echoed in both women's minds. American savagery was documented fact. Jewish advisors controlled Roosevelt. They sought revenge through starvation and worse. Every German woman knew this truth. But wooden crates emerged from those trucks anyway. 400 pounds of roasted pork. 600 loaves of bread still warm from field ovens. The complete contradiction of everything Dr. Goebbels had taught them about American brutality. What unfolded in the following hours would shatter beliefs built over 12 years. These women faced a choice between everything they knew and evidence before their eyes. The transformation began not with American actions, but with German expectations shaped by relentless psychological conditioning. The Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment had spent over a decade crafting anti-American narratives. Joseph Goebbels understood psychological warfare. His ministry targeted German women with specific messages about Allied brutality. Fear became a weapon more powerful than bullets. Allied forces discovered ministry documents in Berlin headquarters during May 1945. Filing cabinets revealed the systematic nature of anti-American messaging. Directive 47 bore a March 15, 1943 date. The contents addressed women's auxiliary services directly. American forces practiced systematic starvation of prisoners. Female captives faced particular degradation. Surrender meant slow death from hunger. Then came abuse that violated human dignity. The directive continued with graphic descriptions designed to terrify rather than inform. The propaganda campaign operated on multiple levels. Radio broadcasts detailed fabricated accounts of American prisoner treatment. Newsreels showed staged scenes of torture and neglect. Educational materials reached every German girl through mandatory organizations. Honor required resistance until death rather than capture by subhuman American forces. Greta Waldheim had operated telecommunications equipment for Wehrmacht 7th Army. Her post-war testimony to American intelligence officers revealed the depth of indoctrination. From 1943 forward, every briefing included warnings about American prisoner treatment. They would starve captured Germans deliberately. Jewish advisors to Roosevelt advocated extermination of German women. She believed every word. They all did. The Nazi regime constructed complete mythology around American barbarism. Racial theory merged with anti-Semitic conspiracy. Wartime propaganda wove everything into comprehensive worldview. Surrender appeared worse than death in battle. Death meant honor. Capture meant degradation and slow torture. By April 1945, American forces pushed through German heartland. Thousands of German women found themselves trapped in impossible situations. These weren't combat soldiers carrying rifles. They served in auxiliary roles. Communications operators maintained radio contact. Administrative staff processed military paperwork. Medical workers treated wounded soldiers. Logistics coordinators moved supplies to frontline units. The 103rd Infantry Division encountered unusual resistance during their advance through southern Germany in mid-April. German women personnel fled rather than surrendered. They attempted to hide in forests and abandoned buildings. This behavior puzzled American field commanders, accustomed to Wehrmacht soldiers accepting inevitable defeat. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrington commanded the 2nd Battalion of 401th Infantry Regiment. His operations log entry from April 18, 1945, documented the unusual encounter. German female telecommunications unit discovered near Niederau. Personnel attempted equipment destruction despite hopeless tactical situation. Required 3 hours of loudspeaker appeals in German to secure surrender. The women appeared terrified beyond normal combat stress. Several wept openly. Others shook uncontrollably. Their behavior seemed inconsistent with military personnel facing standard prisoner processing procedures. 73 women surrendered that day. They represented various Wehrmacht auxiliary services. Ages ranged from 19 to 44 years old. Radio operators who maintained communication links. Telephone switchboard technicians connecting field commanders. Administrative clerks processing military documentation. Medical orderlies treating battlefield casualties. Supply coordinators tracking ammunition and rations. One belief united every woman. American captivity meant death by starvation if fortune smiled upon them. Worse fates awaited if fortune turned away. This conviction came not just from official propaganda, but from rumor networks flourishing in Germany's collapse. Frieda Klein had served as medical orderly with the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division. 22 years old. Her testimony captured the prevailing mindset among captured women. Refugees fleeing the Eastern Front brought stories of Soviet prisoner treatment. Propaganda insisted Americans were worse because Jewish interests controlled them. Revenge motivated every American action. She genuinely believed death would come within days of capture. Suicide crossed her mind, but courage failed. Prayer for quick death became her desperate hope. American forces processing these prisoners faced unprecedented challenges. Standard prisoner procedures assumed combat soldiers, men who understood war's realities. These terrified women, convinced of imminent execution, required completely different approach. The 103rd Infantry Division's intelligence section recognized the psychological crisis immediately. Standard processing wouldn't work. These women needed demonstration rather than explanation. Captain Robert Walsh served as S2 intelligence officer for the 401th Infantry Regiment. His report, dated April 19, 1945, noted extreme psychological distress beyond normal capture reactions. Multiple prisoners expressed surprise at not facing immediate execution. Several refused food initially. They believed it contained poison. Psychological intervention needed immediate implementation. Demonstration of proper prisoner treatment according to Geneva Convention became essential. The decision to establish dedicated processing center came from unexpected source. Colonel Henry Mitchell commanded 103rd Infantry Division Rear Area Security. His civilian background included Philadelphia law practice. Legal training made him acutely aware of Geneva Convention obligations. The propaganda value of proper prisoner treatment also caught his attention. April 20, 1945, brought Mitchell's orders establishing Compound 7 near Wiesbaden, the temporary facility specifically designed for processing female prisoners. Their unique psychological state required special attention. Standard procedures wouldn't address their terror and indoctrination. The compound location was former German agricultural training school. Rolling fields surrounded substantial buildings. Barracks could house over 200 prisoners. Kitchen facilities existed for food preparation. Medical spaces provided treatment areas. Most importantly, the isolated location prevented civilian observation of prisoner treatment. Facility establishment involved careful planning documented in 103rd Division records. Separate barracks provided privacy provisions beyond male prisoner standards. Medical facilities received female medical personnel when available. Most significantly, food service infrastructure received capability for providing American troop rations to prisoners. Lieutenant Sarah Brennan numbered among few Army nurses assigned to the facility. Her diary, preserved in Women's Army Corps archives, described initial conditions. April 21, 1945 arrival found 127 German women prisoners in various psychological distress states. Many refused food, believing it contained poison. Several attempted giving their rations to others. "You should eat while you can" became common phrase. They genuinely believed starvation awaited them. The disconnect between their expectations and American intentions seemed profound and possibly unbridgeable. American response involved exceeding Geneva Convention requirements as deliberate strategy. Colonel Mitchell's April 21 memo to division headquarters explained the multifaceted reasoning. Proper treatment fulfilled legal and moral obligations. It undermined German propaganda, encouraging sustained resistance. Word might spread, encouraging further surrenders. Additional rations received authorization for demonstrating clear contrast with prisoner expectations. Authorization arrived swiftly through command channels. By April 22, Compound 7 received allocation for full American field rations. The same food provided to frontline infantry troops. The menu for April 23 included roasted pork, prepared in field kitchens, fresh bread from Division Bakery Company, canned vegetables shipped from American supplies, coffee with real sugar, not ersatz substitutes, chocolate bars standard in American rations. This represented feasting by German civilian standards in spring 1945. Even Wehrmacht troops often survived on inadequate rations as supply lines collapsed. Preparation of this meal involved 103rd Division Quartermaster Section coordination. Field kitchen units received unusual orders. Sergeant William Harrison served with Division Quartermaster Company. He recalled the special instructions clearly: prepare full hot meal for approximately 150 prisoners. Make it special beyond standard procedures. Fresh bread from Bakery Company replaced usual field expedients. Roast pork replaced typical stew preparations. Real coffee replaced instant substitutes. The captain explained these women expected starvation treatment. American logistics capability needed demonstration through abundance. Food's psychological impact extended far beyond mere sustenance. Germany's collapsing economy made food the ultimate measure of power and security. American abundance represented something German propaganda insisted was impossible. The United States possessed industrial and agricultural capacity so vast it fed enemies better than Germany fed its own people. April 23, 1845 hours marked field kitchen deliveries to Compound 7. Women gathered in main barracks under armed guard. Cooking smells reached them long before visual confirmation. The reaction, documented by multiple observers, revealed psychological conditioning depth. Inga Hoffman later provided detailed testimony about this pivotal experience. The smell reached them first. Roasted meat unmistakable in character. Real bread baking. It seemed impossible given their situation. Watery soup twice since capture represented expected starvation rations. This smell belonged to childhood memories, before the war, before everything changed, from a world that no longer existed. Food distribution began precisely at 1847 hours. American soldiers followed careful instructions from Colonel Mitchell. They served food with deliberate courtesy. Each woman received tin plate, with portions seeming impossible after months of deprivation. 6 ounces of roasted pork, 2 thick slices of fresh white bread, canned green beans, coffee with real sugar, Hershey's chocolate bar. Initial reaction wasn't gratitude, but suspicion mixed with confusion. Several women refused their plates entirely. Others accepted plates, but left them untouched. Still others broke down crying. Cognitive dissonance between expectation and reality overwhelmed emotional defenses. Elsa Bergman worked as stenographer at Wehrmacht headquarters in Stuttgart. Her later testimony captured the mental struggle. She thought it was a cruel joke. Feed them one real meal, then nothing. Make starvation worse through contrast. Perhaps the food contained drugs. Interrogation would follow while unconscious. Simple human decency seemed impossible motivation. Lieutenant Brennan recognized psychological barriers preventing eating. Working with Anna Fischer, German-speaking American officer of German Jewish heritage, they addressed prisoners directly. Fischer's words, recorded in multiple testimonies, carried simple message without complexity. This food contained no poison. It wasn't a trick or deception. It represented their ration as prisoners of war under Geneva Convention. The American Army fed prisoners the same food provided to soldiers. This feeding would continue daily throughout their custody. Starvation wasn't planned or intended. Actually eating that first meal required nearly 2 hours. Women approached food cautiously. Desperate hunger fought deeply ingrained fear. What happened during those 2 hours, documented through multiple sources, represented more than simple meal consumption. It marked the beginning of psychological transformation, challenging everything these women believed about their enemies and their cause. Greta Waldheim, telecommunications operator, described her first bite with vivid detail. Real meat hadn't passed her lips in 4 months. Wehrmacht rations faced repeated reductions. Civilian rations were worse still. She picked up pork with shaking hands, expected wrong taste. Spoiled meat or drug contamination seemed likely. The moment she tasted it, properly cooked and seasoned, still warm from field kitchens, something broke inside her emotional defenses. Crying started and couldn't stop, not from gratitude toward captors, but from realization of how thoroughly they had been deceived by their own leaders. The bread proved equally significant in psychological impact. By April 1945, German civilian bread rations consisted of 225 grams of ersatz bread daily, often made with sawdust, potato flour when available, whatever grain could be found or stolen. The white bread served at Compound 7, baked by 103rd Division Bakery Company using American flour, represented luxury most women hadn't experienced in years. Frida Klein, medical orderly, remembered the bread with specific clarity. It was soft throughout. White color without dark substitutes. Real wheat flour. She held it in her hands, thinking of her mother's kitchen before war changed everything. They had been told America was starving. Their economy had collapsed under Jewish financial manipulation. Jewish financiers had destroyed American agriculture through economic warfare. Yet here was bread superior to anything available in Germany, even during peacetime prosperity. The contradiction was impossible to ignore or rationalize away. Coffee generated perhaps the most visceral emotional response among the prisoners. Real coffee had disappeared from German civilian life by 1943. Chicory replaced it. Acorn substitutes became common. Grain-based ersatz versions provided caffeine-free alternatives. American field coffee, while standard issue and unremarkable to soldiers, represented genuine luxury to prisoners. Inga Hoffman's testimony captured this experience perfectly. They provided coffee with real sugar, actual sugar crystals. She had forgotten the taste completely. In Germany, sugar had been reserved for military use exclusively. Civilians received 150 grams monthly if supplies permitted. Here were captors, enemies supposedly wanting to starve prisoners, providing sugar freely without restriction. The cognitive dissonance proved overwhelming to process rationally. But chocolate bars, Hershey's bars included with each meal, created the most profound psychological impact. Chocolate had been unavailable to German civilians for years of wartime rationing. Even Wehrmacht soldiers rarely saw it in their rations. Casual inclusion of chocolate as standard American ration component demonstrated abundance levels German propaganda insisted was impossible. Lieutenant Brennan observed psychological impact with clinical interest. When prisoners realized chocolate was real, that each received their own bar, several women broke down completely. One woman, an Erica, held her chocolate bar and spoke in English. "You give this to prisoners. This is for children on Christmas. This is treasure." She couldn't comprehend American soldiers receiving these routinely. It fundamentally challenged everything they believed about comparative living standards between nations. The meal concluded around 20-30 hours. Every woman had eaten, though many hesitantly. Empty plates represented more than satisfied hunger. They represented first crack in psychological armor Nazi propaganda had constructed over 12 years of systematic indoctrination. Colonel Mitchell toured the compound at 2100 hours. An official translator accompanied him. He addressed prisoners directly. His words were recorded in division records for posterity. "You have been told Americans are barbaric, that we would starve you or worse. You now know this is false. You will receive 3 meals daily, the same food our soldiers eat. You will receive medical care if needed. You will be treated according to Geneva Convention. We do not make war on women or prisoners. We make war on Nazism and those who refuse surrender." Response from prisoners was mixed and complex. Some expressed visible relief at survival. Others remained suspicious, unwilling to believe proper treatment would continue. Still others experienced something more complicated. Crisis of belief extending beyond immediate survival to fundamental questions about the war, their cause, and everything they had been taught. Elsa Bergman articulated this crisis in testimony given weeks later. That first meal created more doubt than any Allied propaganda could have achieved. They had been raised in Nazi system from childhood. They believed in German superiority, in the Führer's wisdom, in corruption and weakness of America. But people who were supposedly subhuman, controlled by Jewish puppet masters, corrupted by capitalism, those people fed prisoners better than their own government fed its people. Either everything they believed was wrong, or this was elaborate deception. The second option became harder to believe with each passing meal. The night of April 23 to 24 passed with unprecedented quiet in Compound 7. Guards reported, unlike previous nights, little crying occurred. Less obvious distress manifested. The women slept with full stomachs for first time in months, perhaps years. But psychological impact went deeper than physical comfort. As these women lay in their bunks that night, full and warm and alive, they faced uncomfortable reality. They had been lied to systematically and thoroughly about the nature of their enemies. If propaganda about American treatment was false, What else might be false? The question, once raised in conscious thought, could not be unasked or forgotten. Morning of April 24th, 1945 began at 0630 hours with breakfast unremarkable in any American mess hall. But it represented continued impossibility for German women at Compound 7. Hot oatmeal with brown sugar, canned milk for mixing, fresh bread with butter, coffee with cream and sugar. The butter alone, real dairy butter instead of ersatz margarine standard in Germany, created renewed astonishment. Inga Hoffman documented this period in diary she began keeping, written on paper provided by American authorities. Her entries, preserved in National Archives records, provide intimate details of psychological transformation occurring within compound boundaries. April 24th entry noted they fed them again. Breakfast, like childhood memories. American guards seemed puzzled by reactions. To them, this was ordinary routine. To prisoners, it was proof everything they were taught was inverted. The rich were not starving. The weak were not desperate. Germans were desperate ones, and they called themselves strong. 8 days without beatings. 8 days without hunger. 8 days without abuse. These facts shatter everything I believed for 12 long years. Dangerous thoughts creep into my mind like poison. Maybe they lied about everything. The Jewish conspiracy theories, the racial propaganda, the absolute necessity of this war. Every meal tears another brick from the wall of faith that held me together. Each bite of real food makes me question more. By early May 1945, something remarkable was happening at Compound 7. The simple prisoner processing center had transformed into something far more complex. It became a place where German women faced brutal truths, not just about their enemies, but about themselves, about their own participation in the Nazi machine. The atmosphere in the compound had shifted completely. Women who arrived expecting death now questioned everything they once believed. The barracks buzzed with whispered conversations, fragments of doubt, pieces of realization. The foundation of their entire worldview was cracking. The turning point arrived like a thunderbolt on May 4, 1945. American military authorities reached a decision that would change everything. 7 core military records document this moment precisely. 50 prisoners from Compound 7 would take a journey. These women had been selected carefully. They spoke English well. They appeared psychologically stable. Their destination would shatter whatever stability remained. They were going to see Buchenwald concentration camp. The recently liberated hell lay approximately 180 kilometers away. Even within American command, this decision sparked heated debate. Controversy erupted in planning meetings. Colonel Mitchell fought against the plan. His May 3rd memo still exists in military archives. His words were carefully chosen. "These women are auxiliary personnel," he wrote. "They are not combat troops or SS officers." His pen pressed hard against the paper. They bear guilt for serving the Nazi state, but they may not have known the full extent of Nazi crimes. The colonel's concerns were legitimate. Exposing them to concentration camp evidence risks complete psychological breakdown. His handwriting grew more urgent. However, confronting them with reality may be necessary for genuine denazification. The debate raged for hours in stuffy military offices. Higher headquarters made the final call. Major General J. Law Collins commanded the entire region. His authorization came with explicit purpose. The orders were typed on official letterhead. German civilians and military personnel consistently claim ignorance of concentration camps. Each word carried weight. This ignorance, whether genuine or feigned, must be confronted with undeniable evidence. The reasoning continued with military precision. Female POWs will witness camp conditions directly. They will provide testimony about their knowledge or lack thereof. The decision was final. Reality would be their teacher. May 5, 1945 dawned clear and cold. At precisely 0800 hours, 50 German women prisoners climbed aboard U.S. Army trucks. The metal benches were hard against their bodies. Canvas tops flapped in the morning breeze. Among them sat women whose names would echo through history. Inga Hoffmann gripped the truck rail with white knuckles. Greta Waldheim stared at the passing countryside. Elsa Bergman whispered prayers under her breath. Frida Klein wondered if this journey would be her last. Their testimonies would later document everything they witnessed, everything they felt, everything they could never forget. The convoy rolled through devastated German countryside for 4 long hours. Bombed churches stood like broken teeth against the sky. Crater-scarred roads jolted the trucks constantly. Burned-out tanks rusted in muddy fields. This was the Germany they had helped create. Silence filled the truck beds like thick fog. Some women assumed they were being transferred to another facility. Others feared the humane treatment had been a cruel joke. Something darker might be waiting ahead. The uncertainty gnawed at their stomachs. Lieutenant Brennan accompanied the group in the lead vehicle. Her diary captures that morning's tension perfectly. "The women are quiet," she wrote later. "Some seem anxious beyond normal fear." Her observations were sharp. "I wonder if they know where we're going." The lieutenant's thoughts grew darker. "I wonder what they think they know about the camps." Her pen hesitated on the page. "By tonight, they will know the truth. There will be no going back from that knowledge." She was right about everything. Buchenwald had been liberated exactly 3 weeks earlier. April 11, 1945, marked the day American forces broke down the gates. The U.S. Third Army had seen many horrors by then, but nothing prepared them for what they found inside those wire fences. The numbers tell only part of the story. Approximately 238,000 prisoners had passed through Buchenwald during its 8-year operation from 1937 to 1945. At liberation, American forces found roughly 21,000 survivors. These living skeletons existed in various states of extreme malnutrition. Disease ravaged their bodies. Trauma haunted their hollow eyes. More than 56,000 prisoners had died at Buchenwald. Many perished in the final months as Nazi Germany crumbled. The crematorium ovens had worked overtime. The smell of death still lingered 3 weeks after liberation. No amount of cleaning could eliminate it completely. The trucks arrived at Buchenwald at exactly 1215 hours. Women were led from the vehicles toward the camp entrance. Their boots crunched on gravel paths. The smell reached them first. It hit like a physical blow to the face. Death mixed with disease and human suffering. 3 weeks of cleaning hadn't eliminated that stench. Some women doubled over immediately. Their stomachs rebelled against the assault on their senses. This was just the beginning. Inga Hoffmann's testimony to U.S. Army investigators in June 1945 described those first horrible moments. "The smell made several women vomit immediately," she remembered. Her voice shook during the interview. "We didn't yet know what we were seeing, but our bodies knew it was wrong." Then came the survivors themselves. "Skeletal figures in striped clothing," Hoffmann continued. "They watched us with hollow eyes." Her hands trembled as she spoke. "I thought they were corpses standing upright. I couldn't comprehend that these were living human beings." Captain Luther Smith of the Army's Civil Affairs Division supervised the tour. He had been documenting the camp since Liberation Day. His presentation to the German women was recorded by army photographers. Every word was preserved for history. His voice carried no emotion as he began. "This is Buchenwald concentration camp," he announced. The women stood in shocked silence. "This was operated by your government for 8 years." His words cut like knives. "The prisoners you see survived. More than 56,000 did not." The captain continued relentlessly. "They died from starvation, disease, execution, and medical experiments." His eyes swept across the German faces. "This was done in your name by your government, with the support of German civilians who saw the trains and smelled the smoke, and claimed to know nothing." The tour moved methodically through chambers of horror. The women were shown barracks where prisoners had been packed like animals. Bodies pressed against bodies in conditions that defied human dignity. The wooden bunks were stacked 3 high. Thin mattresses provided no comfort. Disease spread rapidly in such close quarters. They were shown the crematorium ovens next, still containing human remains 3 weeks after liberation. The metal doors stood open like mouths of hell. Bone fragments littered the floor. Ashes coated everything in a fine gray dust. The smell here was overwhelming. Storage rooms revealed another dimension of horror. Thousands of prisoners' belongings had been sorted with German efficiency. Shoes piled to the ceiling in endless variety. Children's shoes mixed with adult sizes. Eyeglasses filled entire bins. Gold teeth extracted from corpses gleamed in boxes. Photographs taken at liberation showed piles of bodies awaiting burial. American soldiers had documented everything methodically. The evidence was undeniable. The images burned themselves into the women's minds forever. Greta Waldheim's testimony described her psychological journey that day. "I refused to believe it at first," she admitted months later. Her voice carried shame and confusion. "I thought it was Allied propaganda, staged to make us feel guilty about losing the war." But reality overwhelmed denial quickly. "The smell was real," she continued. "The survivors were real. The ovens were real." Her breaking point came suddenly. "I saw a pile of children's shoes, and I collapsed. I couldn't breathe properly anymore." The full horror crashed down on her. I had served the system that did this. I had believed in the cause that created this hell. Her guilt was crushing and complete. The weight of complicity settled on her shoulders forever. Several women suffered complete psychological breaks, requiring immediate medical intervention. Their minds simply couldn't process what they were witnessing. 4 had to be removed from the tour due to severe reactions. They screamed. They fainted. They went catatonic with shock. But for most women, the initial shock gave way to something worse. A terrible realization crept through their consciousness like poison. This was real. This was German. They had been part of the system that enabled it. Their participation made them complicit in genocide. The survivors added another devastating dimension to the horror. Many spoke fluent German, having been arrested in Germany or Austria for political opposition, for being Jewish. For other reasons, the Nazi state deemed sufficient for imprisonment. Some survivors confronted the German women directly. Frida Klein's testimony recounted one such confrontation that haunted her for decades. "A survivor approached me slowly," she remembered. He was perhaps 40 years old, but looked 70. The man's appearance shocked her. His body was skeletal. His eyes were enormous in his gaunt face. The conversation was conducted in careful German. He asked where I was from. I said, "Stuttgart." Her voice was barely a whisper during the interview. He said he was from Munich. that he had been a teacher before his arrest in 1938 for being a social democrat. The man's question cut to her soul. He asked if I had known about the camps. I said no. But his response shattered her remaining defenses. He looked at me with such sadness and said something I'll never forget. His words were simple but devastating. Everyone says they didn't know, but the trains ran through German cities every day. The smoke was visible for miles. The guards were German boys from German towns. The accusation hung in the air between them. You didn't know because you chose not to know, he concluded. Klein had no answer for him, no defense, no excuse. The truth was undeniable and crushing. She had chosen willful ignorance over uncomfortable truth. The confrontation with concentration camp reality created an immediate psychological crisis among all 50 women. The journey back to Compound 7 was marked by complete silence. Weeping filled the truck beds. Several women withdrew into catatonic states. Their minds had simply shut down to protect themselves. Lieutenant Brennan's diary entry that evening captured the scope of psychological devastation. "We may have broken these women psychologically," she wrote. Her handwriting was shaky with exhaustion. "They've experienced emotional whiplash beyond human endurance." The transformation was staggering to witness. They went from expecting to be starved by Americans to being fed by Americans to witnessing what their own government did to its prisoners. The lieutenant understood the implications. The psychological whiplash may be too much for some to process and survive. Back at Compound 7 that evening, the 50 women who had visited Buchenwald gathered in small groups. They sat on their bunks, processing what they had witnessed. The conversations were overheard and documented by guards. Various stages of psychological adjustment became apparent. Some women immediately accepted full German collective guilt. Elsa Bergman stated clearly to her group, "We are all guilty of this." Her voice carried no self-pity. "I didn't operate the ovens personally, but I served the government that built them. I believed the propaganda that made this possible." Her conclusion was stark and final. "My guilt is real, even if my knowledge was incomplete." Other women nodded in agreement. The evidence was too overwhelming to deny. Their complicity was undeniable fact. Others struggled desperately to reconcile their service with the revealed atrocities. One woman argued with herself aloud. "I was a radio operator. I transmitted military communications only. I didn't know about camps existing." Her voice grew more desperate. "How can I be guilty of something I didn't know existed?" Another woman responded with brutal honesty. "But now we do know the truth. What we do with that knowledge determines our guilt going forward." The conversation continued late into the night. Sleep was impossible for most. Still others attempted to maintain psychological distance through various defense mechanisms. Some claimed the camp conditions were exaggerated for propaganda purposes. Others argued that while camps existed, the prisoners must have been legitimately dangerous criminals. These attempts to preserve fragments of Nazi worldview crumbled quickly. The evidence they had witnessed was too overwhelming. The survivors were too real. The ovens were too functional. The photographs were too detailed. Denial became impossible to maintain rationally. The women who had not visited Buchenwald received detailed testimony from those who had. The accounts spread through Compound 7 over the following days. Ripples of confrontation with reality affected all prisoners. The compound became a place where German women wrestled with questions of complicity, knowledge, and moral responsibility. By mid-May 1945, the context of imprisonment at Compound 7 had fundamentally changed forever. Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8th marked the end of the war. The women were no longer prisoners of war serving a state that still existed. They were captives of a defeated nation awaiting processing and eventual return. The Germany they would return to had been completely transformed. The Nazi state was gone. Allied occupation had begun. Everything they had known was finished. Their homeland existed, but was unrecognizable. The future remained completely uncertain. American authorities recognized the psychological crisis affecting the prisoners. They also understood the potential value of their transformation. The decision was made to authorize a program that would prove historically significant. The women would be allowed to communicate their experiences to the outside world. On May 12, 1945, Colonel Mitchell issued an order documented in compound records. Female prisoners will be permitted to write letters to family members in American-occupied zones. The policy was carefully crafted. Letters will be censored for security, but otherwise unrestricted in content. The reasoning was both humanitarian and strategic. This program serves humanitarian purposes and contributes to denazification by allowing prisoners to communicate their experiences. The letters would carry truth directly to German families still believing Nazi propaganda. The letter-writing program was conducted over several days in mid-May. It generated approximately 340 letters total. Of these, 283 were successfully delivered to family members in American-occupied Germany. These letters, many preserved in German archives and private collections, provide extraordinary documentation. The psychological transformation these women underwent is captured in their own words, written to people they loved, carrying news they could barely believe themselves. The letters revealed the depth of their change. Inga Hoffmann's letter to her mother in Heidelberg was dated May 14, 1945. It exemplified the common themes running through all the correspondence. "Dear Mother," she began in careful handwriting, "I am writing from American captivity to tell you I am alive and well." Her tone carried amazement. "This will surprise you, as I believed I would be dead by now." The contrast with expectations was stark. "Everything we were told about American treatment was false. I have been fed better here than I ate in uniform." The care continued to surprise her. "I have been treated according to international law. No beatings, no starvation, no abuse." But then came the harder truth. "But, Mother, I must tell you something much harder to bear." Her handwriting grew more urgent. "They showed us Buchenwald. I cannot describe what I saw there." The words came with difficulty. "It was real, Mother. The camps were real. We served monsters. I don't know how to live with this knowledge." The letters created a phenomenon, documented in civil affairs reports throughout American-occupied Germany. Families receiving these letters began questioning Nazi propaganda they had accepted without question. This created a grassroots contribution to denazification that official programs struggled to achieve alone. A report from the American military government in Heidelberg noted the impact. Letters from female POWs describing their treatment and what they witnessed at concentration camps are circulating among German civilians. The effectiveness was remarkable. These personal testimonies are proving more effective at confronting Nazi beliefs than official denazification programs. Greta Waldheim's letter to her sister demonstrated another common pattern throughout the correspondence. "I expected to starve in captivity," she wrote honestly. "Instead, I have gained weight here." The abundance was shocking. "The Americans have more food than I have seen in years." The treatment revealed deeper truths. They feed their prisoners what they feed their soldiers: real meat, fresh bread, sugar, coffee. The implications became clear. This abundance makes me understand something important about why we lost. Her analysis was brutally honest. We didn't lose because of Jewish conspiracy or betrayal. We lost because we fought nations with industrial power we couldn't match. The evidence was overwhelming. They can feed millions of prisoners while still feeding their armies properly. Germany couldn't feed its own people. The recognition of American material superiority recurred throughout the letters. These women had served in military logistics and communications roles. They understood the implications of American abundance in ways German civilians might not comprehend. The casual provision of sugar, coffee, chocolate, and fresh meat to prisoners revealed industrial and agricultural capacity. This level of production made German defeat inevitable, regardless of soldier courage or tactical skill. The war had been lost before it truly began. American factories could outproduce German factories. American farms could outfeed German farms. The disparity was staggering and decisive. Frida Klein's letter addressed the medical care she had received at Compound 7. They treated my chronic ear infection that German doctors had ignored for months, she wrote. The American medical supplies seemed unlimited in quantity. The contrast was striking. Real antibiotics, fresh bandages, pain medication. The care extended beyond basic treatment. The doctor, a woman, mother, an American woman officer, told me that every prisoner receives the same medical care as American soldiers. She could barely believe it. I thought of how German civilian hospitals have no supplies, how wounded soldiers die from treatable infections. The contrast made the outcome clear. This difference makes clear why we lost the war so completely. Superior logistics, superior industry, superior resources. The Nazi propaganda about inferior enemies had been completely false, but the most psychologically powerful letters dealt with the concentration camps directly. Women who had visited Buchenwald wrote to family members describing what they had witnessed. They expressed the same doubt and disbelief they had experienced before seeing the evidence firsthand. Elsa Bergman's letter to her father, a former Nazi Party local official, was preserved by American censors. It served as an example of effective denazification testimony. "Father, you must know the truth about the camps," she began urgently. Her words carried the weight of witnessed horror. "I have seen Buchenwald with my own eyes. It is not Allied propaganda as we believed." The evidence was undeniable. It is real. The ovens are real. The survivors are real. The photographs are real. Her conclusion was devastating. "We are guilty, Father. Our entire generation is guilty of this." The complicity was collective and personal. We believed and we served, and we looked away when we should have questioned. The guilt was crushing but necessary. I don't know how to bear this knowledge, but denying it is impossible after what I have witnessed. Truth had overwhelmed propaganda completely and permanently. The American authorities recognized the tremendous value of these letters for denazification purposes. They authorized broader distribution beyond individual families. Selective letters were published in German newspapers printed by American military government. The Civil Affairs Division created pamphlets featuring excerpts from prisoner letters. These pamphlets were distributed to German civilians throughout the occupied zones. A report from the Information Control Division, dated May 28, 1945, noted the remarkable impact. Letters from female POWs are proving uniquely effective for denazification purposes. The reasoning was psychologically sound. German civilians discount official American statements as propaganda. They cannot as easily discount personal letters from German women. The credibility was unshakable. These are their own daughters, sisters, and wives writing. The recommendation was clear. Recommend continued support for prisoner correspondence program. The results exceeded all expectations for effectiveness. Within Compound 7, the letter-writing program had profound therapeutic effects on the prisoners themselves. The act of articulating their experiences to family members forced them to process and integrate what had happened to them. Writing required organizing thoughts, choosing words, confronting truth directly. Psychological evaluations conducted in late May showed marked improvement. Prisoners who participated in the letter program recovered faster than those who did not. The act of communication accelerated healing. Sharing trauma reduced its power over them. Lieutenant Brennan's diary from this period documented the remarkable transformation occurring daily. May 20th. The women are different now than when they arrived a month ago, she wrote. They're no longer terrified of us. The change was comprehensive. Most have accepted their treatment as genuine rather than temporary deception. Many are wrestling with deep questions of guilt and complicity. The psychological work was difficult but necessary. Some have experienced genuine ideological conversion, rejecting Nazism completely and permanently. But transformation varied among individuals. Others are confused, knowing what they believed was wrong but unclear what to believe instead. The uncertainty was painful but honest. A few remain in denial, but they are increasingly isolated from the group. The overall assessment was remarkable. The combination of proper treatment and confrontation with Nazi crimes has created a psychological transformation I wouldn't have thought possible in such a short time. The speed of change was unprecedented in her experience. The processing for eventual release and return to civilian life began in late May. American policy aimed to return POWs to civilian life as quickly as possible. The only requirement was that they pose no security risk to occupied Germany. For the women at Compound 7, the screening process included multiple evaluations. Political evaluation examined their beliefs and transformation. Security clearance ensured they wouldn't engage in resistance activities. Assessment of denazification progress measured their rejection of Nazi ideology. The interviews were thorough and documented carefully. The screening interviews were conducted by civil affairs officers with German-speaking personnel. These officers delved into each woman's service record, beliefs, and current political orientation. The interview records, preserved in National Archives files, revealed a range of transformations that had occurred. Some women expressed complete rejection of Nazi ideology in every aspect. One interview transcript from May 25th recorded a prisoner stating clearly, "I believe nothing I was taught anymore." The rejection was comprehensive. The racial theories were lies. The conspiracy theories were lies. The promises of victory were lies. Her self-assessment was honest and painful. I served a criminal regime knowingly. I bear guilt for that service. But she looked forward with hope. I want to help build a different Germany, a better Germany than what we created. Others expressed more complicated positions that reflected ongoing internal struggle. Another interview showed a prisoner saying, "I still believe Germany had legitimate grievances after Versailles. Some beliefs persisted despite everything. But the camps! There is no justification for the camps, ever." Her conclusion was definitive. I was wrong to support the government that built them. But uncertainty remained about the future. I don't know what I believe now about politics, but I know what I witnessed was evil beyond description. A few women remained resistant to complete ideological change, despite everything they had experienced. One prisoner stated during her interview, You feed us well and treat us properly. I acknowledge that completely. The fair treatment was undeniable. You showed us terrible things at the camp. I cannot deny what I saw there. But confusion persisted about larger questions. But none of this makes the war itself wrong or the Allied bombing of civilians right. Her worldview remained partially intact. I am confused about what I believe anymore. The American screeners recognized that complete and immediate ideological transformation was unrealistic to expect. The goal was not to create instant Democrats from former Nazi supporters overnight. The objective was more modest, but achievable. Break the psychological hold of Nazi propaganda. Create openness to different worldviews. Plant seeds of doubt about totalitarian thinking. A civil affairs report from June 2, 1945, summarized the screening results from Compound 7 comprehensively. Of 243 prisoners processed through the system, the results showed remarkable success. 156 women demonstrated substantial rejection of Nazi ideology. 67 showed partial transformation, with continued questioning of previous beliefs. Only 20 remained substantially unchanged in political views. The recommendation was clear. Recommend release for all categories with continued monitoring where appropriate. The reasoning was sound. The transformation achieved through combination of proper treatment and confrontation with Nazi crimes represents successful denazification model. The women of Compound 7 went on to live long lives in post-war Germany. Most survived well into the 21st century. Their experiences, documented through interviews, memoirs, and historical research, became part of Germany's complex process of confronting its Nazi past. Their stories illustrated both the depth of Nazi propaganda's psychological impact and the genuine possibility of transformation. Inga Hoffmann became a schoolteacher in Heidelberg after her release. She dedicated her entire career to ensuring younger generations understood Nazi crimes completely. The importance of democratic values became her life's mission. She spoke frequently to students about her experiences during the war and captivity. She emphasized the month in American custody as the turning point in her understanding of everything. "That's when I learned the difference between propaganda and truth," she would tell her students. She passed away in 2003 at age 81, having spent nearly 6 decades working to prevent the return of the ideology she had once embraced completely. Greta Waldheim returned to Hamburg and worked in rebuilding the city's telecommunications infrastructure. The Allied bombing had destroyed most communication systems. She married an American occupation administrator in 1948, causing significant controversy in her community. But it reflected her completely transformed political views about former enemies. She emigrated to the United States in 1950, living in Boston until her death in 1998. Her children donated her diary and letters to the National Archives, where they remain valuable primary sources for historians studying this period. Her transformation from Nazi supporter to American citizen embodied the possibilities of change. Elsa Bergman struggled more than most with psychological trauma, from both the concentration camp visit and the crushing guilt of her service to the Nazi regime. She underwent psychiatric treatment in the 1950s for what would now be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. The nightmares persisted for decades. Despite her ongoing struggles, she became active in German-Israeli reconciliation efforts in the 1960s. This work became her path to healing and redemption. She traveled to Israel multiple times to meet with Holocaust survivors and their families. These encounters were painful but necessary for her psychological recovery. She died in 1989, having spent the final decades of her life working toward reconciliation and understanding between former enemies. Her transformation from Nazi auxiliary to peace activist demonstrated the possibility of redemption even after complicity in genocide. Frieda Klein remained in Stuttgart, working as a medical administrator in the rebuilding German healthcare system. She testified at several war crimes trials, providing crucial evidence about German medical practices she had witnessed during her service. Her willingness to testify against former colleagues cost her some friendships, but contributed to historical justice. She maintained correspondence with American veterans she had met during her time in custody. These friendships lasted for decades, bridging the gap between former enemies. She lived until 2007, passing away at age 84, still writing letters to American friends who had shown her a different way of seeing the world. The historical documentation of the Compound 7 experience remains extraordinarily extensive today. The National Archives holds approximately 2,400 pages of documents related to the facility. These include daily operational logs, detailed medical records, personal correspondence, interrogation reports, and comprehensive after-action assessments. German archives contain additional materials, including letters, personal diaries, and post-war testimonies from the women who experienced life at the compound. Combined, these sources provide unusually detailed documentation of how psychological transformation occurred at both individual and group levels during this crucial period. Modern historians studying Nazi Germany and its collapse recognize the Compound 7 experience as an invaluable case study. It demonstrated conclusively that even individuals thoroughly indoctrinated by totalitarian systems could experience rapid ideological transformation. The key was confronting them with undeniable evidence that their core beliefs were fundamentally false. The combination proved devastatingly effective at breaking psychological conditioning. Proper treatment that contradicted propaganda about enemies. Direct confrontation with regime crimes that destroyed faith in the system. The psychological impact overwhelmed years of indoctrination within weeks. The moral complexities of this story remain significant and unresolved. These women had served the Nazi regime in various capacities, contributing to its military operations even if they didn't participate directly in atrocities. Their ignorance of concentration camps, whether genuine or willful, didn't eliminate their complicity in the system that created and operated those camps. Yet their transformation, genuine for the vast majority of them, demonstrated the remarkable possibility of moral growth and recognition of past wrongs. People could change. Beliefs could be altered by evidence. Redemption remained possible even after complicity in evil systems. The American decision to treat these prisoners properly reflected both strategic calculation and genuine humanitarian impulse. Military analysts recognized the propaganda value and the contribution to denazification efforts. Treating prisoners well contradicted Nazi propaganda while advancing American interests. But the individual soldiers, nurses, and officers who implemented that policy often did so from straightforward human decency. They fed hungry people and treated sick people because it was the right thing to do, regardless of strategic considerations. Their humanity transformed their enemies into human beings capable of change. The legacy of Compound 7 continues to inform modern discussions about prisoner treatment, ideological transformation, and the nature of reconciliation after violent conflict. Military ethicists study it as a clear example of how proper treatment serves both moral and strategic purposes simultaneously. Psychologists examine it for insights into belief change and cognitive dissonance resolution. The rapid transformation of deeply held beliefs under pressure from contradictory evidence provides valuable lessons for understanding human psychology and the process of de-radicalization. Historians analyze it for what it reveals about Nazi Germany's collapse and post-war German society's transformation from totalitarian dictatorship to democratic state. The individual stories illuminate the larger historical processes of defeat, occupation, and reconstruction. For the women who experienced Compound 7 firsthand, it remained a defining moment in their lives until their deaths. They entered the facility expecting death by starvation or worse. They left physically healthier, psychologically transformed, and permanently changed in their political beliefs and worldview. The month they spent in American custody accomplished something remarkable. Being fed pork and fresh bread while being forced to confront the truth about the regime they had served created lasting change. It brought them face to face with reality, and reality proved more powerful than even the most sophisticated propaganda. The final lesson of Compound 7 is perhaps the most profound and universally applicable. Belief systems, no matter how thoroughly instilled through years of indoctrination, cannot ultimately withstand persistent contradiction by undeniable reality. Truth has power that propaganda cannot permanently overcome. The women who were taught that Americans were barbaric could not maintain that belief while being fed better than they had eaten in years. The women who were taught that Jewish conspiracies weakened America could not maintain that belief while witnessing American industrial abundance firsthand. The women who were taught that Nazi Germany represented the pinnacle of human civilization could not maintain that belief after witnessing Buchenwald. Truth, when encountered directly and undeniably, possesses transformative power that propaganda cannot permanently resist or overcome. This lesson, learned by German women in an American POW compound in spring 1945, remains profoundly relevant for understanding ideological extremism, the process of de-radicalization, and the possibility of transformation even for those who seem irretrievably indoctrinated. The story that began with women expecting starvation and receiving pork and fresh bread ended with human beings fundamentally transformed by the collision between what they had been taught to believe and what they could no longer deny was true. In that painful but necessary transformation lies both hope and warning. Hope that change remains possible even for those most deeply committed to false beliefs. Warning about the lasting damage done by systematic deception and propaganda. Recognition that confronting truth, however painful that process might be, remains absolutely essential for genuine understanding and meaningful reconciliation between former enemies. The women of Compound 7 learned that reality is stronger than propaganda, that humanity is stronger than hatred. That transformation is possible even in the most unlikely circumstances. Their story reminds us that people can change, that beliefs can evolve, and that even those who serve evil systems can find redemption through confronting truth and choosing a different path forward.